Hello, everybody. It has been a while, but I'm super excited to be sitting down with both of you. I'm really, really cool. I'm really, really interested and think you're both really cool. My name is Audrey, for those who don't know me. I work here at ARCC, and I'm here today with...
Andrew Lockhart. I'm the National Manager for Refugee and Migrant Support with Immigration New Zealand.
And...
Abann K. I'm the CEO of ARCC.
Wow, so this is kind of scary for me. I
will break it down. I will break it
down. Bring it up at staff meeting, but that's okay. It's okay. Today we're going to break down a plethora of things. But before we even get into that, as always, I want these people to know and feel as if you are coming into our home and you are welcome and you are totally free and totally in a safe space. So I want to kind of break down what both of your lives were like before you stepped into these roles. Where were you born? What were your interests? Did you go to university and study these things, or did you just kind of end up in this very deep water and have learned how to swim as a result of it? We'll start off with you, Andrew. What was your life like?
So I was born on the North Shore, and I lived most of my life on the shore. Went to school there, both primary, secondary school, and then started work when I think about 18, and then I went to university after that. I've worked for government and I've worked in the private sector, but I joined immigration, I think, 28 years ago, and worked in a variety of roles across immigration all of that time. I later did my master's degree. I did that in the UK, but that's in public policy and public management, so not directly related to refugee work. But then I came back from London to New Zealand, and this job was available, and I applied for it and came into this role in 2011, I think it was, and I've been here ever since.
And where did the appeal come from? What made you drawn towards immigration and refugee and public policies?
I went into immigration to start with because it looked like it's interesting. I think the one great thing about working for immigration is that no matter how long you've been there, you can never say you know everything. You're learning something every single day. There are new challenges, and people often come and say, oh, you've been in immigration a long time, what about this? And you go, I have no idea. Let's work it out together. So it's a complex area that actually takes across international, economic, social, all aspects of sort of policy all around. So I've always found it really interesting, and this came to this job because I hadn't worked in this refugee or humanitarian area previously, and I wanted to see a new challenge, I suppose. And I think pretty much within about 6 to 8 months, I was really passionate about this area. It's really, you can really, really make a difference. And the stuff that we do, I came back to support the writing of the resettlement strategy, the first one we had in 2011, 2012. And I've been here long enough to have just finished the second one, our policy team, and government signed that off in July, which is really exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And for you, Abann, I've known you since I was quite a little girl, and so it's been cool to see that you have not changed, and you are still full of drive, and you are still full of zeal. But what is a little bit about you and your story, and how did you end up in this field?
For me, I was African native raised child. I was born in South Sudan, and I left South Sudan when I was 13. I've been displaced in Sudan, and then I've been in Syria for 5 years, where I seek my asylum, and afterward I come to New Zealand. Since I arrived in New Zealand, I really I get to exercise how to connect the South Sudanese within New Zealand themselves. This is where the motive of community engagement is started. So at the time, the Auckland South Sudanese communities, they were here, but there's a lack of engagement. And where I come from, I was actively engaged in the community. So when I saw the opportunity, I started just knocking the doors as a part of the culture to get to know some of the families, which is I wasn't aware they were in New Zealand before. And then the conversation rolled from there to say, okay, we used to have a community, but it's not functioning now. And one of the motive was that there is opportunity in New Zealand offering in terms of having incorporated society or trust that will bring community together. So when I knew that, then I consult some of the community members, and they invite us to help a community. Again, there is one of the community member who used to work for immigration. It's called Peter Kennedy. Peter invited us to say, you come to Mangere Resettlement Center and you can use a place there where you can just bring your community together. And then since then, we've been able to organize World Refugees Day in 2006. And this is where the South Sudanese community, they come together. It was a cultural performance being arranged by Immigration New Zealand at the time, which Andrew wasn't there. Then after the event, they told me that we need you to lead our community. And I said, it's not done in that way, but the community can be in a position where we can have a proper community organized. So we put community together. We have executive committee, which is I was part of it as a vice chair. Then we reached out from South Sudanese community to become representative at ARCC as a South Sudan representative. Since then, I find out that it wasn't South Sudanese community only were struggling in resettlement. So it's a wider issue.
Yeah.
And that network is giving me the confidence that I have what it takes to further help out, not just only South Sudanese, but also other new resident and forced migrant background within a New Zealand context. So
definitely.
that is what drive me, and also it gives me a chance where I've been able to seek for more tools and knowledge to advance my area of work. Then I've been involved heavily in non-for-profit management study, social practice, professional supervision, and then lastly, I just complete Master of Indigenous Studies. So this is where I've been involved in the resettlement sector.
Yeah, I think the coolest thing, especially like as a younger person, second generation kind of that experience, is realizing how broad it affects everybody. Yeah. And I think we definitely hone in on like two very specific countries. And then the moment you realize that the person from Germany, the person from Birmingham, the person from Ukraine could have like quite a synonymous experience to you and end up part of this world is just as likely. You know, it's not only just a very specific people group. But before we move even further into those kinds of topics, I wanted to define a few kinds of terms. Because like I said before, when I was reading over the brief and a lot of the stories and the worlds in which we're going to touch on today, there were a lot of words that I didn't really understand in this context and what it could mean and sometimes how harmful it is. So the first one I want to touch on is this term refugee crisis. And how does that actually, if it does accurately, describe what's going on currently? Like when we talk about a refugee crisis, what are we actually saying? And what does it actually mean from a perspective of both of your roles?
Shall I start? I think it's always difficult because it's much broader than perhaps what you might see as the technical definition of a refugee, which is somebody facing persecution and who's not in their own country. So when a crisis like happened in Syria and it's happened in Sudan recently, and in Afghanistan and other places, many people are displaced and they might move to another country where they feel safer, a bit like Abann talked about being in Syria as a place of asylum. But many stay where they are. You know, they're internally displaced. They're still part of that crisis, and there's still some significant challenges for them, even if they remain. And that may put them in danger as well. And so that crisis probably has a number of stages. And the first one is just that response by the international agencies themselves to provide, accommodation, food, support, and refuge for people who have been displaced as a result of it. And then it will move on as time goes on to being able to go, well, which of the durable solutions are available? So in the UN Convention, there are 3 durable solutions that people can utilise. One is being able to return. So if the situation itself can be addressed, then they can go home. Unfortunately, in the time I've been in this job, I don't know I've ever seen one.
It's not
Right. They all seem to be protracted situations. The second is being able to locally integrate, and there's a fair bit of that goes on around the world where people are able to settle. And then for a very small proportion of people, that resettlement becomes an option, and that's usually available for the people who are the most vulnerable and in the most need of settlement. But there aren't a lot of places, given the high number of refugees we have around the world, really. So, and I think, the last 10 years we have seen, I think from my perspective anyway, a real increase in crisis, and it affects not only the people that are affected by it, but the neighbouring countries as well. And most of the burden for those refugee crises actually goes on to those third countries who provide that safety and that space for them to have asylum and safety. So, and we've got the refugee forum coming up in next month, which is an opportunity for all countries to come forward and sort of talk about and pledge what they can do in this space. So it's not just sits with countries, it sits with businesses, it sits with NGOs and others. So it'll be really exciting to see how that international international forum can make a difference over the next 4 years.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, when I was learning and reading about it, the one thing that was just very much highlighted is the suddenness of it. Like, that's really what it is. It's just this abruptness of, like, you go to sleep one day and you've lived this very mundane or repetitive, and you, like, for a high school student, you just get up tomorrow, you're going to be at school by 7, you're going to come back, and then all of a sudden that's just not the case. And it's out of nowhere. You're like, where did that come from? And a part of you actually yearns for the things that you once complained about, be it like, oh, my life is so the same every single day of the week. I just have to listen to this teacher that I find so boring, or I have to go to this work or this job that I don't find any passion, any zeal in. And so the crisis part of it is really this, like, people are being woken up one day and having the world tip down on itself. And then all of a sudden you're scrambling and you're thinking, how do I get out of this? How do I pursue this? And so from your position, Abann, and from where you sit and the role in which you kind of hold at this moment, what do you think is the biggest effect as it pertains to this refugees crisis? What is the biggest impact that we kind of see happening?
Thank you for the question. When I look at it in terms of defining refugees crisis, the question that people should ask themselves, this is label has been given to them. It's not them defining themselves. It's not a refugees crisis. It's a world leaders crisis. How it become a refugees crisis when you see them, they've been forced, and it's not their choices to escape or run from their life. You see? So it's not a refugees crisis. We should be able to look at it. If it's their crisis, how they create that for themselves. So we need to look at a definition of the word itself. It's not a refugees crisis. It's other crisis. So to reflect on what Andrew was saying is really important that in international context where New Zealand really involved. New Zealand involved in a lot of the option of the durable solution because New Zealand immigration have 2 roles to play. One is offshore, and other role is onshore. The offshore one, they involve with other partners internationally, especially UNHCR and IOM. So their role there is just when there is a cases that has been referred to New Zealand based on New Zealand criteria of selecting people who need refuge or need protection, which is, we talked about it before, when it comes to the selection for people to resettle in New Zealand, we have three criteria, which is women at risk, medical attention and disability, and also the emergency cases. So this is the contribution of New Zealand as a society to ensure that those have a place to call home. Because when you are in a refugees situation, you don't have a place to call home, and you don't have a voice either. Because you are living in a refugees host countries. Because when you live in a refugees host country, the UNHCR will act on your behalf. So whatever they try to give you, they give you their best to ensure that you are safe. So that's what they do. And also, within New Zealand here, we have some of misunderstanding about who is a refugee and who is not a refugee. So for people already has been given opportunity to settle in New Zealand here, they are not refugees any longer because the durable solution has been achieved, which is a resettlement. So they're not refugees any longer. It's similar to those who return home to their home country. It's similar to those who've been given local settlement within a refugees host country. So arriving in New Zealand here is the end of the refugee cycle. So on your arrival, correct me if I am wrong, Andrew, you have been given permanent residence. So which is mean you are New Zealander. So this is the privileges some of our community, they should be able to understand it, is that when you are here, you like any other New Zealander, the only difference is that you need more extra help compared to ordinary New Zealander.
Yeah, I think if this shows anything, it's the danger of labels.
Yes.
And, you know, and it's like the labels in any regard, like even, like especially for me, I remember going through high school and hearing all of these names, you know, being put on me. And then when I went to university and nobody cares, you know. But when I was 16, it felt like my entire world. I was like, what am I gonna do? Nobody's gonna want to date me, hang out with me, be my friend. No one's gonna want to study with me, you know, because I'm all of these words that were put on me. And then suddenly I realized that you, like what you're saying, you actually have this sense of like authority and power to, but that's not who I am, you know, and that's not what I want to be. Or that's actually not a bad thing, you know, which I think is another thing that kind of comes with labels, is you have these negative connotations, and it's wrapped up in these things that are associated with inadequacy or being incompetent or not being able to read and write or achieve or study. But in actuality, all it really means is your country went into a tip and you had to leave. That's, you know, that's what the core of the word is. The word does not mean you cannot get a degree. The word does not mean you have no skill set. You know, the word does not mean your family is weak or forever be in poverty. All it means is that out of nowhere, everything in your life changed, and you suddenly became this person that needed help. And I think that's something that is global. Whatever it is, at any point of our lives, we all become people that just need help and just need support and need to be able to feel like they belong to something and they belong to a group of people that are passionate and for them. And so you spoke a little bit on the obligation of New Zealand and what you guys kind of do offshore and in the international level. So we're going to go to a little bit of a break, and when we come back, we're going to break down what happens in our country and the national obligations and the offerings in which you guys present to those who are now considered permanent residents and are looking to resettle.
Thank you for having us.
Two more sections, don't worry. Welcome back, everybody. In this section of our episode today, we're going to be breaking down any and everything that happened in our backyard. So this is all as it pertains to New Zealand and the national aspect of things. But one thing that I always found fascinating and found even more fascinating when learning about today's topic is this idea of making someone feel like they belong, someone feel like they're at home. And it always stuck in the front of my mind, and I haven't stopped thinking about it because I don't know if it's a human design. I don't know if it's something that we can approach the way we do with buildings and architecture, and we build these 3D blocks and then we put it in place and then we see it come to life. But when it comes to things like making people safe, at peace, not worried, not judged. They don't feel under a microscope. They don't feel like everyone knows that they stand out and they're different and they do things differently, or they have a different story. From your perspective and from your experiences, what's the point? Why do we go after this thing if it really is something that happens in the heart and in the mind? Why is it important to make people feel like through the process of resettlement, permanent residency, making New Zealand their home, it's important that they feel like they belong?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, because I think it came through in both development of both strategies. So the one we did in 2011, people said, actually, we want to be able to participate and have that sense of belonging. And it came out very clearly this time around when we did the consultation and engagement with the communities again. It's not something you can impose on people. It belongs to them. It's really inside of them. And I remember when, as I say, we had this theme as part of our National Refugee Resettlement Forum, must have been 5 or 6 years ago at least now, where we had a panel of people talking about what it was that gave them that sense of belonging. And it really was quite different for individuals.
Yeah.
And I always remember one person standing there and saying, you know, I felt like I belonged when one night I was watching the rugby on TV and I felt I'm cheering for New Zealand. I actually feel like I belong here.
Right.
And so it's a very individual thing. But I think you're right. It's about well-being, and it's about safety, and it's about the opportunity to be able to actually participate and contribute to the community. And it's how welcoming the community itself is, and how they value people that are coming to live in their community, and how they see that as enhancing and growing and strengthening their community. So, you know, I think that's why, alongside the programs that we have for, particularly for settlement of refugees, we also have the Welcoming Communities program, which really does start to knit together the community and build those networks across, not only to welcome refugees, but also to reach out to migrants and others who are coming into the communities. And I think that's been a very successful program. It's still work in progress, but if you've got a network in your community, you'll start to feel like you're actually part of it, and that you can feel safe to participate. You can feel confident when you participate in the community itself, and that you're giving something back to the community, which is another thing I think people feel that they want to do as well when they come to New Zealand. So, yeah, it's personal, I think, for people, but there's a lot we can do in the environment to help them.
Because I always think about the ones who don't have the three main factors that often connect us, right? So if you don't have a faith, right, you don't believe in someone or something, right? For me, it would be God. It would be the faith that comes around Christianity, right? And then if you don't have a culture, so if, like you were saying, I loved what you said in the first part about, like, so you learned how to include the South Sudanese community, that, like, people who don't have a community already, right? Or a group, a people group. And then you have those who come by themselves. And so I always wondered, when people don't have a faith, a people group, a culture, or come already isolated, you know, what do they do? Where do they go? How do they start? Who do they reach out to? Because what if there is nobody in their circle who's like, hey, I actually know a man who actually works directly in this industry, and he's, you know, dedicated his life alongside other people to putting in place functions. Or like yesterday, they had a women's leadership community and they learned how to make Middle Eastern bread, and there was women from everywhere, you know? So, but if I came over here by myself, how do I hear about those things? How do I know that there are people out there learning how to make my food, you know, and that I'm actually wanted and people actually desire to learn about who I am? What do those kinds of people do? Where do they go?
Thank you, Audrey, for that. I think our audience need to have better understanding that there are services already exist within a New Zealand context when the new resident arrive in New Zealand. So to give you a broader context of their arrival, when they arrive in Mangere Resettlement Center, which is, they call it Mangere Refugees Center, and we call it Mangere Resettlement Center. So when they arrive there after 6, or it used to be 6 weeks, but now I think it's changed to 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So when they've been allocated to their resettlement location, which is being led by Immigration New Zealand, so when they reach there, there are services which has been catered for them on their arrival, so that they will be able to have a better process of resettlement. One of the thing that, which is you were talking about, sense of belonging, from ARCC where we are sitting, is that the role we have taken is that to create the environment to make them feel who they are. I think within in New Zealand we have a term used by Tangata Whenua Manaki Tanga, and a fairness of treatment of people, or the hospitality of New Zealand, or the kindness that human to human can offer. So what we're trying to do is just to create that environment for them to look who they are. It's not using a discriminatory language that make them feel they're not part of this society. So this is where we create that environment. You mentioned before about the Women Leadership Network. This is where the women come there and impress themselves who they are, whatever culture they come from, that is space for them. The same thing for youth, the same thing for men, the same thing for elderly. So now when it comes to sense of belonging, I can give you my example, for example, that when did I feel I belonged to New Zealand? It took me years.
Yeah.
Because what is happening is that I've been engaged with a study, I've been engaged with work experience, I've been engaged with the community. One of the tricking point for me that I belong to New Zealand when I've been able to help people who are in a position to help themselves, taking the role of New Zealander who care about the need of other people and fulfill that need, and they say, oh, thank you for helping me. And what I said, that's not just only me, that's in New Zealand, because from the journey of recovery, I reached to the stage of discover what New Zealand can offer. And what New Zealand offered me, I took it and I grabbed it. And one of the things that I'm proud of is just speaking out and explaining yourself. Tell your story to people around you.
Definitely.
And that was the tools I've been using. And then I reached to the point that there are people who are listening to what I am saying, you know? And then I reached to the point that one of the services, which is I recall for my family when I have my children in hospital, and the services they cater for that, it made me proud compared to where I come from. And the other thing as well, when there is a local election or national election within New Zealand where we're having civic engagement with the politician, and then they tell you you are New Zealander and you need to exercise your right and you need to vote. And that is the most important one. And the last example I have is just when you go overseas and come back, was in the airport when the custom and immigration officers, they tell you, welcome back, Mr. Yer. Welcome back home. That itself, it makes you, your feeling you belong to this country, because it's about feeling. And that kind of human attraction or communication is make you feel who you are as a person when you have the right approach has been given to you. So those spaces really make me realize holding New Zealand nationality and going overseas, being recognized as a New Zealand nationality, is give you a pride to be you are part of this society.
1000%.
Yeah.
Because I think what both of you have spoken about is that it's beautifully complicated because it's our identity.
Yes.
You know, and so the reason and the desire to belong is because it's attached to identity.
Yes.
You know, these examples that you've given, they weren't just speaking about, hey, you belong here. They were calling you something that attached and completed your identity. You know, and you're no longer this man on the run. You're no longer this man desiring and seeking or praying or hoping that when you arrive, you'll be able to not have to look over your shoulder anymore. But you're actually somebody who is considered a Kiwi.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's why it takes a minute. I loved what you said about years. I think that is universal because because I came to New Zealand so young, I think the main misconception is that there is no readjustment. But the coolest thing, of course, about having parents is you take on and learn everything they do, you know? And so a lot of it is hand-me-downs and a lot of their readjustment. I remember I didn't go for a bushwalk or anything like that because my mom was afraid, you know? And so when I went on my first bushwalk in primary, I was like, no, I can't go in there, I can't go in there, I can't go in there. Why? Oh, my mom's terrified of it. So you don't have an experience with it? No, my mom's terrified.
You have that
You know?
experience.
And so it's now no longer this thing of like, I just adjust. My mom just adjusts. We all adjust, you know? And I was learning, no, the native birds, the native bush here is actually a sight to behold. Like, it's beautiful. Yeah. The first time we had guy fawkes, our neighbors, my mom called the police thinking it was gunshots, you know? And so this fear was like, oh my gosh, I can't do guy fawkes, I can't do, you know?
Did not recover.
Yeah, you know, but I didn't go through it. I have no idea what that's like, but I know someone who has, you know? And so the readjustment process, the calming down, the hey, you can breathe, you know? It's just a thing that people do. That all pertains to identity. And when I learned that being Burundian and being from Africa can actually coexist with living here, that was when I felt like I belonged. Because a lot of the time you feel like you have to separate. You can't be both. You can't be a person of color and a Kiwi. You know, you can't speak Kurundi and English. You can't have a passion for music back home and also have a passion for reggae and indie and country. You have to pick who you want to be and you have to go after those things. And the day I learned that there's a duality and all of it can work like a circle and they can just feed into each other and you don't have to separate yourself into these different compartments, you know? The best thing is when you learn, because we are so complicated, everything can live together and everything can live inside of the body. And so I think that's awesome. And we spoke a little bit more as well. We spoke a little bit about the selection process and how difficult that is. But one thing I do want to touch on that we kind of mentioned off the camera was how 50% of those who migrate are actually children. And so, kind of unpack that for us a little bit. Why do you think we don't hear about that? What does that look like for the countries receiving these children? I mean, what is it like resettling a child, you know? And what does it take to walk them through the normal things like puberty and feeling like they want to be wanted and seen, and they're changing all their passions and they're doing all of that in a completely different place?
I mean, I think for children, especially if they come younger, do really, really well. You know, if you watch them at the Mangere and at the reception program, they're quick to learn. English becomes their language. They're picking up te reo and culture and everything else, and they're like sponges. They absorb everything.
Yeah, definitely.
And they go on and progress. I think it gets a bit more challenging, like you say, when you come in as a teenager, because you've got this whole area of settlement to work your way through, and what all of that looks like at the same time as puberty and being a teenager and sort of, you know, all of the stuff that goes on there. But I think that's where those networks across youth are really important. And then making sure that people can actually, if they come later in their youth, being able to transition into further training and or further education to make sure they actually can build a career for themselves. Because that first stage of coming to New Zealand is all about learning the language and how it all kind of works. And then you've got your topics on top of that. But, you know, I think when you look back, I mean, there are a lot of former refugees who have come as children and gone on to careers, great jobs, and given back to the community as well. Of course, parents, you know, often are travelling at a different speed, and often they need the children to help them pick them up a little bit. Yeah. Definitely. And I know in the education area, it's not only connecting the children to education, but the parents to those children's education as well, because that's an important component of being able to progress as you go through, really.
Yeah, what I need to add, I think, what's your question is that there are more services can be improved when it comes to having young people coming to resettle in New Zealand, because some of them, they've been affected directly or indirectly by the trauma or the challenge their parents they've been through. And not only that, because we should have a process of healing process or self-reconciliation, where the people, they will start realizing how they're going to move on with their life compared to what they've been experiencing offshore, and then to discover what New Zealand going to offer to them. One of the services as well, conflict resolution, because some of the young people, they become adult in their home because their parents don't speak English, they speak English, so they become interpreters.
Yeah.
And then within a New Zealand education system, there is an opportunity where the parents, they need to involve in the homework of the children. At the same time, when there is a family conference at the school, to go and see your child performing.
Yeah.
So those kind of activities, some of the children, they've been affected on that.
Yeah.
And this is where you will need a conflict resolution process within the sector, or our size sector can be accessed, because it create also a role shift within the parent as well, because the woman role is going to become different and the man role becoming different. Because some of the community where we're coming from, the men, they see themselves as a provider to their families, and the woman is just look after the kid at home. But when they come to New Zealand here, it's totally different culture and different approach. So those are kind of unpack some of the issue or the new challenge people are faced when they come to New Zealand here. So those kind of the services of healing process or conflict resolution should be tied to the resettlement process, because this is what we do at ARCC. Some of underlying issues, people might come to you to say, oh, I have a housing problem. But when you go deeper, you find there's a lot underlying issue associated with the families.
Definitely.
And then we start supporting them to ensure that, first of all, as you mentioned before, majority of adults in our community, they never recover quickly because of what happened in the past. So they pass, it become holding them hostage, they can't let it go. You know, some of adults, which is I work alongside them, it's not easy for them to let it go. But with some of the young people, just they need a little bit of just training, and they're going to move on with their life. So those are kind of the services we might be able to look at it in the future, how we can help young people just to be innocent young people and just be who they are, and then grow up as a Kiwi young people, suing their future without any distraction, and making sure as well, not going to be like you're afraid to go to have a picnic, and then when people going to the bush in New Zealand, no, I'm not going to go to the bush because my parents was experiencing that.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure they're having a sense of just safety and making sure New Zealand is safe, nothing is going to happen to them.
Yeah.
And just for the young audience outside there, just my encouragement to you is just your role is just to figure out who you are.
Yeah.
That will determine what you're going to be able to pursue in your future.
Yeah, I think a huge part of it is breathing in integration.
Yeah.
Like some of my most enjoyable experiences as a teenager, as a young adult, have been when my friends who are from California, from Hawaii, from Australia, they took me surfing.
Yeah.
Which Burundian do you know goes surfing?
It's you.
And I remember being there being like, what?
Yes.
You know, like this is, I mean, now I go surfing every week, you know, and it's like, it's one of my favorite things to do. But there was a period of my life where it was like, no, we are not doing that. The waves are huge. I've drowned out there, you know, learning how to stand up on a ball, learning how to catch a wave, all these different things. But I cannot imagine the world I would have missed out on and the joy I would have missed out on if they weren't open to teach and I wasn't open to learn.
Yeah.
And it's just an exchange. That's what I would say. This idea of belonging and resettling is just be open to exchange. You know, you take a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You know, and even like working alongside people who speak so many different languages. You know, I find myself with my other friends being like, yalla yalla, you know, and it's like, it's little words. But I was telling Ehsan how, like, I went to the kebab store and I asked the woman, I said, what language do you speak, Arabic or Farsi? She's like, oh my gosh, you know Farsi? I said, of course, salam. And she goes, oh my gosh, wow, you know. And then she made, I know she made my kebab with just extra, you know, because it tasted good. It tasted the best kebab. And then when I went to, I said merci when I got my food, and then when I went to go, I said Pedrut, and she goes, oh, Pedrut, you know, and it's nothing. Like, I can't say my name. I don't know how to speak a whole language, but me being open to learning from my coworker, you know, showed this young girl, hey, there's heaps, you know, don't worry about it. You're gonna do just fine here. You know, multiple people are so open to your world and your language, and so yeah, there's healthy individuals make healthy communities. So I think it's awesome that you spoke about, like, the healing process, because I think that's one bit we neglect, is like, how are people doing emotionally? How is their heart? You know, are you actually mentally okay? How else can we allow you to know that this is a new chapter, and it's scary, but it's going to be amazing as well. So we're going to go to another break, and in this last
I think
sector,
before we go to the break, there's
Hit
something
me.
I need to tell you, is that this reason we say to many Kiwis who are service providers, from ARCC's point of view, we say, you be a reason to someone you help to say, I love New Zealand because of what you've done to them. And what those, your friends have done, they make you feel who you are, they make you how you belong here. So let us just be a New Zealanders who give a little bit of help to someone, whether a stranger, to say, thank you so much, I love New Zealand because of what you have done.
yeah,
It's those connections that make the real difference, really. Like you say, if you
friendship.
connect with people and you can kind of talk to them, and there's a commonality, then it helps people feel that they belong. And I think also that it helps people feel that they can move forward with what they want to try and do.
Definitely.
Because at the end of the day, what we want for all refugees is for them to thrive. That's really where it sits.
That's incredible. We'll see you guys in the third sector. Guys, I'm so sad. This episode is almost done. I really enjoyed this. I feel like it's not as intense as I thought it was going to be. It's actually really nice. And it's kind of like sitting and talking with two Abanns, but like one in completely different roles. So that's like super sick. And it's our last sector, and so we're gonna wrap it up a little bit. But I do want to honor and thank you both for coming and letting some random 20-year-old interview both of you guys about your roles and have you defend yourselves and explain your ideas. It's truly been my privilege, and I'm super grateful for that. In this part, I really kind of want to run it home, and I really want to touch on any other misconceptions or difficulties. You really want to encourage people, hey, you've got this in the bag, and allow people to know that these positions that you hold, if anything, for them. And it's for their encouragement, it's for their fruition, it's for them to excel and go from the best to the best. Is there anything that both of you or either of you are kind of just like, I really want to explain this part?
Well, I think around the meaningful participation by refugees in the work, because at the end of the day, it's their voice that really, really matters, you know, and their experiences will shape what needs to be done to support settlement. And certainly we've now established the refugee advisory panel, and that's only really a start. I think, you know, where we've really the real strength has been in some of the design work where we've actually engaged former refugees in helping us design some of the policies, like the
really
refugee
cool.
family support category, and how with the change that came in 2020 with the additional support that people, families got, and with the extended program for the community sponsorship program, that really helps. And I think that work we need to continue, because it needs It needs to kind of be at a policy level. So where are the areas where the greatest needs are and what's the best way to respond to those? It needs to be at the design level of the solutions. And I think as we move forward, it needs to be there around the delivery as well. So how do we invest in that to make sure that participation is meaningful and that it makes a real difference, because that's where I think we will get the biggest changes and much more direct impact on former refugees themselves in terms of their settlement. You know, I've probably got skills around being able to facilitate that or think about that, but I don't have the experience myself. But I'm really, I mean, I think one thing that comes from doing this job and working in this area is the passion that you have for making a difference, really, and every day, you know, come to work knowing that it can make a difference, but actually it's the community themselves and the people that that are there that really are going to make that change, I think.
And what about for you? What do you think, or have any final things you want to touch on?
Yeah, the thing just I want to touch on is about disinformation when it comes to resettlement process. So many public and service providers, they use discriminatory language, which is hold back many community members to move on with their life. I think that is not a New Zealand practice. Always was in ARCC, we're saying some of the service providers, they have adopted refugees host country practice, because one of the issue I've been touching base on before is about some of the community, they've been held hostage based on their past, because the practice of the refugees host country for people who've been in refugees camp is bad, because some of them experience open prison. When you talk about refugees displacement camp and refugees camp, two different. But when you are in refugees camp, it's just like you are in the open prison, because you can't access your right and just you do what you're being told. And that kind of the practice, some people develop victim mentality. And for them to live their life and come to New Zealand and finding some of the organization just label them as refugees, because majority of them, they don't know their right, they don't know their titles, and that holding them back, because when they access services, they think to themselves, I think that term is allowing me to access what I want. But they don't have any ideas how it's affecting them in the long term. That's just from the community point of view. But from the service provided point of view, when it comes to the human right-based approaches, that there are a principle which each service provider should look at it in terms of participation. When Andrew talk about participation, it might be from the government viewpoint or from its role as someone who's been experienced. But when it comes to the community, based on that principle, is that resettlement system is start from the policy and strategic people who make that. The question is, there is a former refugees based on their language, or there is a new resident or people with lived experience sitting in that table? That's the question. If it's not, which is need to be improved. Secondly, practice or program in the way how it's been delivered. When the decision been made to design that program, those people live experience that in table or not? This is something as well need to be considered. And when we decide how to locate the resources, because this is one of the important areas as well, there is a power dynamic around it. We are operating as an organization with a lack of the resources that we might expect the government can contract our organization to deliver the services our community need. But that is not the case. The case is just lack of the resources, also it adding more conflict within the community expectation on the organization, what we can do for them. So we are trying to negotiate with some of government services that we're capable to do some of work, which is we need to be trusted. We need to be given the opportunity that how we can be able to collectively, because in the end of the day, it's about New Zealand country services to their own people. So that is one area I think we need to work on it to strengthen our services to the new arrival to the country. So now it's just, I'm talking to you and Andrew from the government, is that they're looking for the outcome of the community to have better resettlement. But better resettlement without allocated resources attached to it is going to be very hard, because you can't achieve things where you rely on a voluntary capacity. And this is what we experienced more than 18 years, you know. So now it's about opportunity, having willingness from the government point of view, like the program we were talking about before, Welcoming Community program. It's a well-designed program, but the most important part of it, how the input of the community to that is become really relevant, and how it being resources. So that will give us the opportunity to make sure that we have a better outcome of integration process. Because when we talk about integration, about belonging, about social cohesion, is about inclusive involvement and participation. So those are the things that the service providers, whether NGOs or government agencies, they need to look at it.
I think the key word that both of you have mentioned throughout the whole episode is that it's a process, you know, like it's nothing that you can rush. It's nothing that you can fast forward, you know, even in those moments where it is really tough. It's really tough in whatever regards, if be it adapting, be it learning the language, learning the style, learning the way in which, because there's a lot of things that cultures have that they're not aware of it. So they can't tell you it, you know? They can't tell you, no, you bring a plate whenever you go to somebody else's house, you know? Because it's just what they do. And so have grace for yourself, you know? Be open to that being okay, and that's not embarrassing. It's just another thing to learn and take on, you know, because all of it is a process, and all of it requires you just having your hands open. And I think another thing that you touched on that really stuck with me was you have some people living in open prisons where everything is stripped from them, and then they come to a place where everything is given back. And that's not a light switch, you know? That's not something you can suddenly turn on. If you've genuinely got into this like cyclical nature of just being obedient, just coming under whatever is being told, that like sudden urge to say everything that's on your heart and your mind just doesn't come back, you know? And so really encouraging towards like being patient, being graceful, and taking your time, but also taking everything that is yours and just having the time of your life. I think living in New Zealand has been the time of my life, and it's been wild, like doing stuff like surfing, like cliff jumping. I remember when I told my mom I sprained my tailbone because I fell out of a tree into the water, and when you hit the water above 6 feet on your back, it's like considered a slab of concrete. And so me and my friends were cliff jumping, and I fell out of a tree, and I landed, I think we were 15 feet up, and I landed straight on my back. And I remember being like, Mom, that was amazing. I want to do it again. Then she was like, Audrey, you're not going out. You're not going out. Yeah. You are not leaving this house anymore. Yeah. Every time you tell me you're going out with your friends, I'm not letting you go. But it was exhilarating. Same thing when I drowned. I remember I drowned up in Modi Bay. I got hit with this 2-meter wave, and I hit the rocks. And so I passed out, and I just swallowed way too much water. And I woke up, I was like, you know, chilling. My friend who was a lifeguard, by the grace of God, carried me out. And I was totally fine, and I went right back in. And I did it again and again and again until I learned how to do it. And I told my mom, I was like, yeah, look at the sunset. Like, look how amazing it was. Oh, that's where I drowned, but it's okay because Sam picked me up and took me back out. And she was like, Audrey, please stop telling me these stories. You're going to give me high blood pressure. I'm going to pass out. I'm going to have a heart attack. Yeah. But I think, like, it's so awesome. Like, honestly, if you're listening to this and you're like, it's terrifying. I don't want to go to that high school club. I don't want to go to the university club. I'm too scared to make friends or go out into these different groups. There is a world out there that is an oyster, and it's beautiful. It's scary. It was scary drowning, you know? I thought I was never going to walk again for a minute after I fell out of that tree because it really hurt. But the experience, I wouldn't trade that, you know, because now I have friends from everywhere, and every single culture brings something different to the table, and it's been my privilege, you know? It's been my privilege learning about the beauty of tapestry, the beauty of coffee, you know, the beauty of the water, the beauty of hiking, all these different things. But it has truly been amazing to sit down with both of you. And I know this is going to bless somebody, and I know it's going to open up a lot of needed conversations. And it has been awesome to sit down with you all today as well. As your host, I'm Audrey. This has been...
Andrew Lockhart.
And...
Abann.
What's your last name? That's it, okay. He doesn't want you to find him, guys. It's just Abann. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Be blessed.
Thank you.